Good evening, night wanderers. Welcome aboard the Midnight Caravan. Before we begin, hit like and subscribe so we know you're still with us when the lights go out. If you're new here, say hello in the comments and tell me where you're listening from. Tonight, we return to the Appalachian Mountains, where fog crawls through the hollers and the woods whisper in old tongues. 10 true stories from those who went searching for silence and found something waiting in the dark. Let's begin. If you've ever driven the back roads through Briar Hollow after midnight, you've seen it. The fog that creeps up from the creek bed and doesn't behave like fog should. Locals joke it's old miner's breath rising from the shafts that honeycomb the hills. Most just laugh it off. I didn't. Not after last winter. I was running night deliveries for a distribution outfit out of Bristol, mostly old mining towns and gas stations that barely stayed open. The routes paid well because no one wanted them. Too remote, too quiet, too many stories. That night's drop was a 2-hour haul down Route 91, ending at a diner in Briar Hollow. Weather said clear skies. But right after I passed mile marker 43, the fog came down hard, thick, sudden, like someone flipped a switch. My high beams cut maybe 10 feet ahead. I slowed to a crawl, rolled the window down, expecting to hear rain. Nothing, just a low hiss, like air escaping through gravel. A shape flashed past in the ditch, something crouched, pale against the weeds. I hit the brakes, heart pounding. By the time I reversed and aimed my lights, it was gone. That's when I noticed something odd. The fog wasn't rolling. It was flowing, like a current, moving uphill instead of down. I figured maybe a temperature inversion, some trick of the valley. Then I saw a light up ahead, red, steady, hovering at windshield height. I thought it was another vehicle's taillight until it drifted sideways into the trees. I pulled over and grabbed my flashlight. Bad idea. The beam barely cut through the mist, but I could see movement in it. Slow swirls, shapes forming and collapsing. One looked almost human, shoulders hunched, head tilted. "Hey," I called out. The fog pulsed outward, then went still. For a second, I heard breathing that wasn't mine. Close, deep, wet. Then something brushed my sleeve, cold and slick like condensation come alive. I jumped back into the truck and slammed the door. The windshield fogged instantly, thick enough that I had to wipe it with my sleeve. My hand came away wet and gritty, like I'd wiped ash instead of water. I threw it into drive, floored it, and didn't stop until I saw the diner's neon sign bleeding through the mist. The parking lot was empty. I backed up to the loading dock and killed the engine. The fog stayed right at the tree line, like it didn't want to cross the gravel. I sat there a long time, trying to slow my breathing, watching it drift and swirl. Then I saw movement behind the neon sign, 3 figures walking slowly out of the woods, half hidden in the haze. They looked like men in miner's gear, helmets, lamps, coats stiff with grime. But their lamps were dead, and their faces, what I could see of them, were wrong. Smooth, featureless, like the fog had melted their expressions away. They stopped just past the light's edge, standing still, waiting. I turned the key, ready to get the hell out. But before the engine caught, a soft knock sounded on my driver's side window. Not hard, gentle, polite. I froze. The fog had crept closer, no more than a few feet now. A handprint bloomed against the glass, 5 long fingers trailing mist. A voice, low and breathy, whispered through the crack in the seal. "Turn your lights off. We see too much." Then the fog rushed in, through the vents, through the cracks, through everything. And the truck lights died all at once, swallowed by gray. When I woke, the sky was clear, sun sharp in my eyes. The diner doors were open, the dock empty. My radio buzzed static, and on the inside of the windshield, written in streaks of gray dust, were the words, "Next time, don't breathe." I told myself I'd passed out, carbon monoxide, bad fuel line, anything but what it felt like. But the air in that cab had been clean. I remember how sharp it smelled, almost metallic. When I climbed out, the parking lot was empty. The diner doors hung open, lights off, no movement inside. I called out a few times, my voice echoing weirdly off the hills. Even the birds had gone silent. There was a layer of fine gray dust coating everything. The truck, the gravel, even the weeds along the ditch. I touched it, and my fingertips came away slick, like the residue of wet clay. Inside, the diner looked frozen mid-shift. Coffee still steaming on the counter, a jukebox light blinking behind layers of fogged glass. I found a delivery clipboard on the counter with my company's name and signature space. My own name was already written there in my handwriting. Date, that same day, time, 3:11 a.m. It was 2:47 by my watch. Something clattered in the kitchen. I walked toward the sound, every step echoing too loud. The air temperature dropped 10 degrees between one footfall and the next. The kitchen was empty except for a back door swinging slightly open. Beyond it, the fog pressed up against the threshold like it was alive, curling and unfolding. There was something else too. Boot prints on the tile floor. Not fresh, old, dusted gray, but they led from the back door to the prep table, where they simply stopped. And on that table, resting in a perfect circle of condensation, was a miner's lamp. I reached out. The lamp was warm, faintly vibrating, and when I turned it toward the door, the fog outside pulsed, almost like it reacted to the light. A faint voice came with the next gust of air, quiet and ragged. "We told you not to breathe." The fog pushed inward, spilling across the floor like water. It crawled up my boots, cold and heavy, clinging. When it touched my skin, my breath hitched. I swear I could hear it in my head, whispering in a dozen overlapping tones. "Don't take the air. Back." I stumbled backward, dropped the lamp. The glass shattered, and the fog recoiled, hissing like something burned. I bolted through the dining area, out into the lot. The world outside was unrecognizable. The diner's neon sign flickered, colors reversed, red now blue, blue now pale white. The road beyond the gravel lot shimmered like it was underwater. I got into the truck, started the engine, and floored it. The tires threw up clouds of that same gray dust, and the fog chased close behind, tendrils reaching for the tailgate. The radio crackled to life mid-drive, a voice breaking through the static. Female, calm, formal. Briar Hollow incident log. Subject 47 attempting egress. Visibility at 0%. Air reclamation incomplete. Then a man's voice, distant. "Leave him. If he carries the breath out, it'll spread." The line went dead. I drove blind for what felt like hours. When the fog finally broke, I was miles from the main road, truck idling at the edge of a dry creek bed. I sat there shaking, chest aching like I'd run a marathon. My throat felt raw, lungs tight. When I coughed, fine gray dust spilled from my mouth onto the dash. I tried to start the truck again. Nothing. The battery light flickered, then died. When I stepped out, the fog was gone. Clear air, blue sky, only one thing out of place, a sign nailed to a tree just beyond the creek. No breathing beyond this point. I turned back toward the cab. Inside, across the windshield, fresh streaks of dust spelled a new message. "You brought it with you." I left the truck right there by the creek and started walking. The air felt normal at first, cool and crisp, the kind of morning mountain air that bites your lungs awake. But each breath burned a little more than the last, like I was inhaling ash I couldn't see. I followed the road until it narrowed into gravel. My phone was dead. My watch, frozen at 3:11 a.m., the same time on that diner's delivery slip. Every sound felt wrong, birdsong too far away, my footsteps too muffled, like the air wasn't carrying sound the way it should. After a mile, I saw movement ahead. A man stood in the ditch, wearing a high-visibility vest with the county logo. I called out, and he raised his hand, but not to wave, to cover his mouth. "Don't breathe," he said. I stopped cold. He pointed to the slope behind him. The fog was rising again, pale gray against the green tree line, and moving uphill fast, defying gravity, spilling toward us in threads. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped. "You're leaking it." What are you talking about?" The man reached into his pocket, pulled out a respirator mask, and tossed it to me. "Put it on, or you'll seed the air." I stared at him. Seed the air? But the fog had already reached the roadside, fingers curling through the grass. Where it touched, the color drained away, leaves bleaching white, soil turning the same gray dust that had coated the diner. The man's eyes went wide. "Run!" He didn't move. The fog reached his boots first. He inhaled once, sharp, and then froze, literally froze. His skin dulled to stone, his outline blurring like a statue being carved out of smoke. I turned and ran uphill, mask clutched in one hand. The fog chased me, whispering in overlapping voices, some angry, some pleading, all familiar. "You breathed us in. We remember the warmth. Don't take the air away." The slope leveled out at the old strip mine overlook. Rusted machinery sat half swallowed by kudzu. The fog lapped at the edge of the clearing but didn't cross the dirt line, as if something held it back. I collapsed beside an abandoned generator, panting through the mask. My breath fogged the inside of the filter. For a moment, I thought I'd outrun it, until I heard the engine cough behind me. My truck idled there, gray dust puffing from its exhaust. I hadn't driven it. I hadn't even heard it approach. The driver's door creaked open. A figure stepped out, wearing my jacket, my gloves, face obscured by haze seeping from his mouth. He walked stiffly toward me. Every step left a footprint that filled with fog instead of dirt. "You brought it with you," he said, my voice exact. "Now it needs somewhere to go." I stumbled backward, fell against the generator. My twin crouched down, tilting his head. The air between us rippled like heat. He pressed a hand to my chest. It was colder than stone, colder than breath. "Don't fight it. You're just air now." I gasped, and he leaned in. The fog poured from his mouth into mine, freezing everything in its path. I felt lungs fill with something thick and alive, moving, whispering. When I came to, the clearing was empty. My clothes were damp, my skin gray at the edges. The mask was gone. My reflection in the truck window looked like me, but when I exhaled, the glass fogged and stayed that way, the condensation spreading outward like veins. The radio crackled again, one final time. Briar Hollow reclamation complete, subject absorbed, air stable. Then silence. I drove until I hit daylight, until the fog vanished in the rear view. But even now, weeks later, every time I breathe against glass, mirrors, windows, my own rear view, it fogs instantly. And sometimes, in that mist, I see other faces breathing back. They never blink. They only mouth one word. Exhale. They say being the winter caretaker at an overlook station is the easiest job in the world. You check the logs, make sure the roof holds, keep the pipes from freezing, and wait for the thaw. That's what I believed, too, right up until I realized I wasn't alone up there, and the person leaving me notes in the logbook was me. The station sat on a ridge above a half-frozen reservoir, deep in Appalachian country, closer to Virginia than anywhere else, though you wouldn't know it by the map. The road closed every December. Snowplows couldn't reach past the first mile, so for 3 months it was just me, the wood stove, and the wind. I loved the quiet. I'd wake up before dawn, sweep the porch, note the weather. My first week, the snow came down soft, muffling the forest into that strange kind of peace where even your own breathing sounds too loud. The radio check-ins were twice a week, and the rangers 40 miles south didn't care what I did as long as I kept their property standing. The weirdness started on January 3rd. I opened the station ledger to fill in my daily report and saw a fresh entry already written there. Same pen, same handwriting as mine. Dated for that same morning. Wind steady from the east. Saw movement near tree line. Possible hiker? We'll investigate. I hadn't written it. I hadn't even gone outside yet. I told myself it was an old page I'd flipped to by mistake, but the ink was wet. I touched it. It smeared. I went to the window. The sun was just climbing, lighting the pines with that cold gold that makes everything feel older than it is. And at the far edge of the clearing, near the start of the trail, I saw footprints. Not mine. Barefoot. I bundled up and followed them. The tracks went straight from the forest edge to the generator shed, then circled it twice before vanishing at the back wall. No return path, no drag marks, like the person who made them had walked straight into the siding. I radioed base, but the line was dead. Probably weather, I told myself. That night, the generator kicked off at exactly midnight. I went out to restart it, and as I passed the porch, my flashlight hit something nailed to the railing, a strip of lined paper folded once. My name was on the front. Inside, written in my handwriting, was a single sentence. Stay inside during the missing hours. That phrase haunted me. Missing hours? I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the snow drift sideways, the storm building in slow motion. Around 2 a.m., my wristwatch stopped. The tick just paused, the hands stuck at exactly 2:03. Outside, the world had changed color, everything washed pale blue, like moonlight through ice. The wind stopped. Snowflakes hung in the air, not falling, not floating, just suspended. I stepped onto the porch, heart slamming. The air didn't move. My breath came out but didn't drift. It stayed there, a faint mist frozen mid-air. The forest looked painted. Then, from somewhere deep among the trees, a voice called my name. Flat, distant, like someone trying to remember how it sounded. I ran back inside and slammed the door. The clock on the wall ticked once and jumped ahead to 3:14. Everything was normal again. Wind howling, snow falling, generator humming. But when I checked the ledger the next morning, a new entry waited for me. Dated 2:03 a.m., written in my hand. I told you not to go outside. I didn't touch the new entry for a long time. The ink had dried to a dull blue. Same pen I'd used the night before. Same slight slant in the M's and Y's. I even checked the indentation under the line. Fresh, pressed into the paper so hard it had torn the next page. I sat there, staring, while the stove ticked behind me. I kept hearing my pulse in my ears like it was part of the wind. When I finally did move, it was just to tear the page out and shove it into my jacket pocket. I couldn't stand the idea of leaving it open on the table, like the words were waiting for me to write back. That day, I tried to act normal. Checked the perimeter, knocked the snow off the satellite dish, walked the tree line with my rifle slung low. Every so often, I caught flashes of color through the woods, gray movement against white, too big to be a deer, too steady to be branches. At dusk, I found another set of prints heading toward the back door. Not barefoot this time. Boots, my boots. Same tread pattern, same scuff on the right heel. They stopped just short of the threshold, facing the door, toes nearly touching the mat. The lock turned from the inside. Click. I froze. The door opened 2 inches, air sighing out like breath from a lung. Then nothing. I slammed it shut, threw the bolt, and dragged a chair under the handle. Every window in the cabin reflected the same thing. My shape in the glass, standing where I shouldn't be, head slightly tilted like I was watching myself from just the wrong angle. I didn't sleep again that night. I watched the hands on the clock crawl toward 2, half dreading, half expecting them to stop. At 2:03, they did. The silence came back. No wind, no crackle from the stove, no heartbeat in my ears. Just stillness so deep it felt liquid. I stood, moved to the window, and looked out. The world was frozen again, snowflakes hanging mid-air, every tree sharp as glass. And at the edge of the clearing stood a man in my parka. He lifted his hand in slow motion, pointing back toward the cabin. His face was shadowed by the hood, but I could see his breath hanging in a perfect, unmoving cloud. Something about his stance was wrong, too exact, like he was mimicking a memory. I whispered through the glass, "Who are you?" His breath cloud twisted, forming the word "you" before breaking apart into glittering frost. I stumbled back. The wall clock jumped to 3:14 again. The wind roared to life, and the sound of the forest came rushing back all at once, like a dam breaking. When I dared to look outside again, the figure was gone. But the snow in front of the porch was disturbed, footprints leading right up to the door. On the railing, nailed with the same tack as before, was another note. Stop writing it down. I didn't. I can't. Every morning since, there's been a new entry in the ledger in my handwriting. Weather, temperature, conditions, even meals I never ate. Some entries are dated days ahead. The one waiting for tomorrow says, January 27th. Hand injury worsening. Will try to hide key before nightfall. My hands are fine. At least they were. But tonight, as I write this, the skin on my right palm has started peeling. Thin strips curling like burned paper, raw underneath. And every time I blink, I see that other me in the window again, closer now, hand pressed to the glass, smiling faintly. He's mouthing something I can't hear through the storm, but I can read it. It's your turn to stay. By the last week of January, I'd stopped pretending I was keeping watch for anyone but myself. The radio hadn't worked in days. The trails were buried under 6 feet of ice crust, and the food stores tasted of metal. I'd started hearing the generator cough in my sleep. Steady 3-beat rhythm, like something mechanical learning to breathe. That morning, I woke to the sound of the front door unlocking. A clean, deliberate click. The bolt was still thrown. The chair I'd wedged beneath the handle hadn't moved, but the lock, inside the metal, shifted on its own, the tumblers turning slow, like fingers spinning them. When I checked the ledger, a fresh entry waited. January 28th, locked out, watching from the ridge, left the key where I can find it later. It was my handwriting again, shaky but unmistakable. I tore out the page and burned it in the stove. The flames hissed blue, releasing a smell that reminded me of winter breath on glass. Then I reached for the master key, the one that opened every outbuilding on the property, and it was gone. The drawer was empty, except for another note folded twice, scrawled in graphite so dark it looked wet. Look behind the west wall. I shouldn't have, but the compulsion was strong, like an itch beneath the skull. I took a crowbar and pried at the paneling. The nails came free too easily, and behind the wall I found a narrow crawl space filled with ice. And wedged upright in that ice, staring out through a thin layer of frost, was me. My parka, my boots, my face turned gray under the glaze, the eyes open, the mouth slightly parted as if exhaling. The key hung from a cord around its neck. I fell backward, hit the floor hard enough to see stars, the air filled with the smell of pine sap and rust. From inside the wall, the frozen version of me moved. The eyes shifted downward. The lips cracked and broke, whispering through the frost. You were supposed to lock the door. Every hair on my body lifted. The temperature dropped so fast my breath crystallized mid-air. The window glass bloomed with frost flowers, spiraling inward until I could barely see the tree line. And through those patterns, I saw a second figure walking across the clearing. Another version of me, fresh and solid, footprints deep in the snow. He stopped by the porch, looked straight at the cabin, and raised a hand to wave. That's when the clock froze at 2:03 again. Time stuttered. The world went blue-white and still. The frozen me in the wall smiled. Ice cracked around its jaw. You hit it well, it said. But now it's my turn. I blacked out. When I woke, it was dawn. The cabin door was standing wide open, and the snow outside was smooth, no footprints, no sign of a storm. The ledger lay on the table, one final entry written in the same familiar hand. January 29th, departed early. Replacement arrived safely. Key returned. The line below it bore a signature that matched mine exactly. I checked the mirror above the stove. The reflection blinked a half-second late. There was a small silver key hanging from my parka zipper, one I didn't remember putting there. I'm writing this from town now, but I can't shake the feeling that I never actually left that ridge. Sometimes, just before I fall asleep, I hear wind rattling an old door latch, faint as a memory. And every morning, there's frost inside my windows shaped like handwriting. Stay inside during the missing hours. I've worked housekeeping at the Pine Hollow Motor Inn for 11 years, the kind of roadside place where fog eats headlights and the smell of bleach never really fades. You learn a rhythm there. Check out, strip the beds, don't think too hard about the stains. But the quilt from room 12 broke that rhythm. It was a handmade thing, patchwork squares in faded reds and yellows, the kind of old country craft you only see at estate sales. I found it balled up in the laundry chute one Thursday morning. No tag, no record in our linens inventory. Just sitting there, warm to the touch like someone had slept under it seconds before. Normally I'd toss an unlogged item into the lost and found bin, but it felt wrong to fold it. The fabric almost seemed to breathe when I lifted it, each seam flexing softly like the rise of a chest. I laid it over the housekeeping cart, and for the rest of the shift, no matter which hallway I was in, I swore I could hear a low whisper coming from the cart wheels, something like a sigh woven into the cloth. That evening, our night clerk, Benny, asked if I could prep room 6 for a long-term guest. "Guy's been here before," he said. "Pays in cash, never stays more than a week." Room 6 was always drafty, the heater rattled, and the window seal never held. I figured the guest might appreciate something heavier than the cheap blankets we stocked, so I grabbed the unlogged quilt. When I shook it out, a small photo fell from between the folds. It was Polaroid old, edges yellowed, showing a couple in front of this same motel sign. The woman's smile was strange, wide but flat, like it hurt to hold. Someone had written on the back in shaky cursive, "To keep us warm." I left the photo on the nightstand and spread the quilt. The instant it touched the mattress, the air changed. Warmer, thicker, like the whole room exhaled. My breath fogged even though the heater was off. The guest checked in an hour later. Middle-aged, gray stubble, quiet. I offered him extra towels. He didn't look at me, just stared past my shoulder toward room 6 and said, "You put it back, didn't you?" I told him I didn't know what he meant. He didn't answer, only walked inside and shut the door. I was halfway down the hall when I heard the latch click. Then came another sound, soft fabric shifting, the kind you make when you pull covers up to your chin. The next morning, room 6 looked undisturbed. Bed made, towels folded, key on the dresser. The guest was gone. Except the quilt was still warm, and when I lifted it, the sheet beneath was damp, not with sweat, not with water. Something thicker, darker, metallic. There was a single word written across the fitted sheet in finger-traced letters. "Stay." And underneath, pressed into the cotton like the shadow of a hand, was the outline of a face, mouth open, as if still whispering from beneath the fabric. I almost quit that morning. I should have. But it was off-season, hours were scarce, and you don't just walk away from steady pay out here. Not unless you've got a reason better than the sheets are talking to me. I stripped the bed with tongs, stuffed everything into a biohazard bag, and hauled it to the basement laundry. The smell hit before I even reached the stairs, coppery, like old pennies. When I opened the chute door, steam rolled out, thick enough to fog my glasses. The industrial washer was already running. That was impossible. I was the only one with a key to the laundry room. I cut the power and yanked the lid open. The water inside was dark, black at first glance, but under the fluorescence it shimmered red-brown. Floating on top, perfectly folded, was the quilt. Bone dry. I slammed the lid and backed away. My hands were shaking so hard the key nearly slipped from my grip. The room felt suddenly smaller, the air dense, humming faintly like a motor behind the walls. I left the washer sealed and went upstairs to tell Benny. He wasn't behind the desk. Only his coffee cup sat there, still steaming. The logbook was open to last night's entry, room 6. Under guest name, someone had written, returned. That word followed me the rest of the day. I couldn't stop thinking about the Polaroid, the couple, the way the air warmed when the quilt touched the bed. Around dusk, I finally went back down to the laundry. The washer was empty. Not a drop of water, not a trace of the quilt. Just a faint ring of warmth around the drum, like it had held heat all day. That night, the power went out across half the motel. The only lights still working were in the east wing, where room 6 sat, glowing dull yellow through the fogged glass of its door. No one was checked in. I called out, "Maintenance!" and turned the handle. The air inside was hot. My skin prickled instantly. The quilt was spread on the bed again, smooth and perfect. The photo was gone, but a new one lay on the nightstand. This one showed only the bed, empty except for the quilt, and a shape just visible beneath the fabric, curled on its side. The instant I touched the picture, the door swung shut behind me. Every vent in the room began to breathe, pushing out warm air that smelled faintly of detergent and something sweet. The quilt lifted gently, as if something underneath it was shifting. I whispered, "Hello?" The lump beneath the quilt twitched once. The shape of a hand pressed up from underneath, palm open, as if reaching for mine. My throat locked. I bolted for the door, but the handle burned my skin, hot metal, like it had been left in the sun. The vents sighed louder, almost like they were trying to lull me back. Then I heard the voice, soft, muffled, female, coming from the bed. "We just wanted to be warm." The quilt rose higher, the outline of two figures now, one larger, one smaller, tangled together. The room smelled like scorched cotton. I stumbled backward, hit the lamp, and the bulb shattered. For a heartbeat, everything went black. When the emergency lights flicked on, the bed was empty again. Only the quilt remained, folded neatly in the center, steaming faintly. There was a new Polaroid on the pillow. It showed me. Standing in the doorway, eyes closed, the quilt wrapped around my shoulders, and written on the bottom edge, in that same shaky hand, "To keep us warm." I drove home that night, with the heater off and the windows down, hoping the cold would scrub that smell of warm fabric off my skin. It didn't. The air in my car got thick halfway down the mountain, fogging the inside of the windshield until I had to pull over. The glass was hot to the touch. By the time I reached my trailer, the quilt was sitting on my porch, folded, perfect. I stood there staring at it for a long time. I hadn't touched it since that night in room 6. I'd left it locked in the laundry basement, buried under spare linens. It shouldn't have been here. The air around it shimmered like heat rising from asphalt. When I leaned close, I smelled cedar, detergent, and something faintly metallic. My own breath came out cold, but the quilt surface rippled like it was exhaling. I didn't bring it inside. I couldn't. Instead, I wrapped it in a trash bag, shoved it into the truck bed, and drove to the county dump. The night attendant barely glanced at me as I tossed it into the compactor chute. The next morning, I came into work early. Benny was there, pale and sweating, trying to scrub something off the counter. The logbook lay open. Across the entire page for that night, in identical shaky handwriting, were two words written over and over: "Too cold." I asked what happened. He said the heaters in every East Wing room had gone berserk, thermostats reading 110, no power surge, no noise. Every bed was hot to the touch, he whispered, like someone left bodies in them. I went to room 6. The door was ajar. Inside, the quilt lay folded at the foot of the bed, spotless, seams tight, not a wrinkle in sight. I picked it up carefully this time. No warmth, no smell, just cloth. I almost laughed. Maybe I'd been losing my mind. Then the fabric shifted under my fingers, just a tiny twitch, like something breathing in its sleep. A whisper brushed the back of my neck. "You took us out." I dropped it. The quilt hit the floor and unfolded itself. 2 shapes pressed up from inside it. Human outlines rising beneath the fabric like someone trying to surface from deep water. The temperature shot up fast, a wave of heat that fogged the windows and filled my lungs with air so heavy I couldn't breathe. The shapes rolled toward me. I stumbled back, tripped over the nightstand. My hand hit the Polaroid camera. Instinct took over. I snapped a photo. The flash blew the room white. When my vision cleared, the quilt was flat again, spread neatly across the mattress. The air cooled. The light returned to normal. The Polaroid slid out of the camera, still developing. It showed the bed, empty except for the quilt, and 2 faint impressions beneath it, head to head, eyes closed, as if asleep. Below the image, the caption had appeared on its own, etched into the chemical film before it dried. "Thank you for keeping us warm." I left the room, locked the door, and never went back. A month later, the Pine Hollow Motor Inn burned to its foundation. "Electrical fault," they said. "Total loss. Nobody hurt." The building had been empty for weeks. When the fire crews were done, they found one thing lying unburned in the ashes of room 6. A single square of fabric, edges charred, still warm to the touch, and printed faintly along the seam, barely visible under soot. "To keep us warm." I used to think churches were the quietest places in the world. I was wrong. They're only quiet when they're empty. And I mean truly empty, not the kind of empty that still remembers people. This happened to me 2 winters ago, when I was working as a janitor for a Baptist church in a little mountain town somewhere near the Tennessee border. I took the job because it paid cash, and the work was simple: sweep, polish, lock up after evening choir. The old pastor liked to remind me that the Lord was listening. I used to think that was metaphorical. The choir held a heritage revival that month. Old hymns, shape note singing, stuff from before any of us were born. The kind of music that sounds like it should echo across a hollow at midnight. My job was to clean up after, which meant hauling folding chairs, emptying coffee urns, and collecting hymnals the singers left behind. That's how I found it. A battered, hand-stitched book sitting on the altar rail. It wasn't like the others. The cover was leather, but soft, worn thin. No publisher mark, no date. Inside, the notes were written by hand, the ink browned with age. Someone had scratched a name across the inside cover in fountain pen. For the ones who still listen. I almost laughed. It felt like something from a ghost story. I tucked it under my arm and brought it to the back office to ask the pastor about it. But he was gone already. Lights off, doors locked. I left it on the desk and finished mopping. When I came back, the book was on the piano bench. I figured I'd just forgotten where I'd left it. I took it home, planning to drop it off in the morning. My apartment was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that presses against your ears. I flipped open the book. No lyrics, just musical notation, strange time signatures, 5/8, 7/11, and a melody that looked like it was winding back on itself. I don't play, but I hummed the first few bars to see how it might sound. It was low, uneven, but weirdly catchy. That's when I felt something move behind my eyes. Not pain, just a flutter, like a muscle twitching inside my skull. My jaw tingled. My tongue did too, as if a note were sitting there waiting to come out. I shut the book fast. But as I went to bed, I could still hear it. Not through my ears, in my mouth. Like the melody had taken up residence somewhere between my teeth and my breath. At first, I thought I was just overtired. I tried brushing my teeth, gargling, even humming something else to shake it loose. Every time I stopped, the same tune picked up again, muffled, internal, too close to be real sound. The next morning, I brought the hymnal back to the church. The pastor wasn't in, only Mrs. Clark, the choir director. I told her I'd found it after the revival. When she saw it, her face drained. "Where did you say you found that?" she asked. "By the altar," I said. She made the sign of the cross, not something Baptists usually do. That book was supposed to stay sealed. Reverend kept it from the old revival site on the hill. They said the song inside doesn't stop when you do. I half smiled, waiting for the punchline. She didn't give one. That night, cleaning again, I swore I heard someone humming in the empty pews. The same tune, slow and thick, like it was being played through water. I turned off the vacuum and listened. The sound stopped instantly. But when I opened my mouth to call out, the hum came from me. The same notes, perfect pitch, all by themselves. I clamped my mouth shut, and the melody kept going, soft, muffled, still coming from somewhere behind my teeth. I drove home that night with the radio cranked loud enough to shake the mirrors, just to drown it out. Didn't matter. The tune was still there, steady, looping beneath every word the DJ said. I caught myself mouthing along, not the lyrics. There weren't any. Just a low hum, like a mosquito between the ears. Every few minutes, I'd stop, and the silence afterward felt wrong, like cutting off a sentence halfway through. By the time I pulled into the lot behind my apartment, my lips were bleeding. I'd been biting them, I think, just to feel something real. I didn't sleep. The sound didn't come from outside or inside. It was behind everything, a background drone that filled the cracks of quiet. Around 3 a.m, I felt pressure under my tongue, like a bubble swelling there. I went to the mirror, turned on the bathroom light, and saw a faint shimmer tracing the inside of my mouth, right where the veins run. It pulsed in rhythm with the melody. I shut the light off and sat on the floor until dawn. The next day at the church, Mrs. Clark wasn't there. The pastor was. He looked worse than I felt, eyes pink, tie crooked. I told him about the book, the humming, the mirror. He didn't laugh. "Son," he said quietly, "I told them to bury that thing." He opened a drawer and pulled out a faded newspaper clipping. "Church fire, take 6 during Midnight Revival, 1954. The photo showed a half-collapsed chapel and a crowd standing in fog. "They found that hymnal in the ashes," he said. "The men who opened it claimed they could still hear the song. 2 of them went deaf inside a week, but they said the melody stayed." I swallowed hard. "What did they do with it?" He smiled without humor. "Same as you. Tried to give it back." I offered to burn it, but he shook his head. "It doesn't like fire. It likes breath. That's how it travels." That word made my stomach twist. "Travels? Don't you notice? You're humming while you talk." I hadn't, but when he said it, I realized he was right. My throat was vibrating, a soft hum that wouldn't stop even when I clenched my jaw. The pastor stepped back. "You need to leave it here," he said. "Go home. Don't speak for 3 days. Don't sing." I wanted to argue, but the sound in my head got louder, almost panicked, like it didn't want to be left behind. My vision blurred. I dropped the book on his desk and stumbled out into the daylight. All the way home, the tune twisted. It changed key, quick little stabs of harmony that sounded almost human. When I passed a mirror again, the shimmer was gone, but I could feel something still inside me, tapping against the back of my teeth like fingers drumming on glass. That night, I tried not to sleep, but exhaustion won. I dreamed I was standing in the old church from the newspaper photo. No roof, just stars. I saw figures in the pews, shadowed heads swaying together, all humming that same impossible melody. In the center stood a pulpit, and on it, my own reflection was leading them, mouth wide, eyes rolled back, voice spilling gold light. I woke up choking on a note I hadn't meant to sing, and the hymnal was back, sitting on my kitchen table, closed, the air around it warm as breath. A line was written across the first page in my handwriting, though I hadn't touched a pen, for the ones who still listen. As I read it aloud without thinking, the hum in my skull shifted, and then a second voice joined mine, from inside my mouth, singing harmony, using my tongue like an instrument. I don't remember deciding to sing. I just did. It was like watching someone else pilot my body, my throat working on its own, breath sliding out in waves that didn't belong to me. The second voice, my second voice, moved against mine, filling the room with sound that wasn't quite human. Every window rattled. The cheap light fixture trembled. The air itself felt thick, syrupy. My body vibrated until my vision blurred around the edges. Then everything stopped. Silence. And then a whisper, so close it might have been a thought. Keep listening. The next thing I knew, I was lying on the floor. Morning light slanted through the blinds, and the hymnal sat open beside me. The page had changed again. I don't mean a new song, I mean it was different. Fresh ink, neat staves drawn across the paper, and notes climbing upward like stairs that never ended. I swear they were still wet. I grabbed it and threw it across the room. It landed spine up, pages fluttering, and for a second, the hum came from inside the walls. I could hear it moving, down the pipes, into the floor, under the refrigerator. The apartment began to sound like a throat clearing before a sermon. I bolted, left everything, keys, phone, wallet. I drove straight to the church. The pastor's truck was there, door open, radio hissing dead air. The front door of the chapel was unlocked. Inside smelled like candle wax and ozone. He was in the front pew, sitting very still, eyes open, lips moving. I thought he was praying, until I realized his jaw wasn't moving naturally. His tongue was pressed flat against his teeth, vibrating so fast it blurred. The hymnal sat on the altar again, open to a page I hadn't seen. The title scrawled across it read, "Resonance for Two Voices." I took one step toward him. He turned his head just enough for me to see the blood on his chin. It wasn't dripping. It was pulled upward, like gravity had forgotten which way was down. "You brought it back," he said, but his lips didn't sync with the words. The sound came from his throat, but the tone came from mine. I backed toward the door. "It's not mine," I said, though it felt like a lie. The hymnal snapped shut by itself. The echo hit like a gunshot. Then everything went quiet again, except for that low, impossible hum threading through the rafters. I ran. Didn't even look back until I was halfway down the hill. From the road, I could see the stained glass windows glowing faintly, shifting colors to the rhythm of that song. That was the last night I worked there. I moved 2 towns over, took a night janitor job at a warehouse, but the melody didn't stay behind. It's quieter now. Most days it hides under normal sounds, fans, motors, wind. Still, sometimes I'll catch myself humming without realizing it, syncing to something that isn't playing. Last week, a new hymnal showed up in the break room, wedged between vending machines. Same leather cover. Same note on the first page. My coworker found it and laughed at the inscription. He started humming an hour later. I keep telling myself to destroy it, but every time I try, my throat tightens, like something deep inside me wants to protect the song. So I just listen now. Because once it gets behind your eyes, it's not really a song anymore. It's a voice waiting for its next harmony. I hike alone a lot. That used to sound cool, independent, self-reliant, but these days it feels more like a confession. Because after what I saw in the Smokies last year, I can't even drive past a trail sign without my stomach tightening. It was early autumn, fog thick as milk, when I went out to photograph the fire towers near the state border. I'd parked at a half-rotted ranger gate, planning to take the switchback trail up to an old observation ridge. No one else was out there. The air smelled like wet iron, and the silence was the kind that feels alive. Halfway up the ridge, I noticed a break in the tree line. My map didn't show a spur there, but a faint path cut through the brush, straight and deliberate, like it hadn't been used in years, but still remembered being a trail. Curiosity won. I followed it. The path got steeper, narrower. After about 15 minutes, the woods opened suddenly into a clearing, and that's where I saw them, stone steps. They started right there in the middle of the clearing, rising up toward nothing, maybe 20 feet high, narrow as a single doorway made of granite that looked older than the trees around it. No platform, no ruins, no foundation, just a freestanding staircase leading into the air. I know about the stories, the stairs in the woods creepypastas. I've even read a few on Reddit. But seeing one in person, it didn't feel like fiction. The stones were slick with moss, and there was a thin frost on the edges, even though the air was warm. I circled them once, snapping photos. No carvings, no tool marks, nothing human. But the strangest part was the air, dead still, like sound refused to cross the clearing. My phone lost signal halfway around. Then I noticed something carved into the lowest step. Shallow letters, almost worn smooth. Return same way. That should have been my cue to leave. But I'm a photographer, not a survivalist. Curiosity overrode caution. I set my tripod, framed the shot, then climbed 2 steps to get a higher angle. The stone under my boots felt warm. That made no sense. Everything else was damp and cold. The warmth spread through my soles, up my calves, like stepping into sunlight. For a second, the fog shimmered gold. And then the forest changed, not gradually, instantly. One blink, and the trees around me were taller, darker. The air smelled like smoke. The clearing was gone. The steps were still there behind me, but the trail I'd come from had vanished. Something moved through the woods. Not fast, slow, heavy, deliberate. I heard branches snap, then voices, faint and echoing like they were underwater. A woman's voice, humming a tune I almost recognized. I turned back to the staircase. It looked different now, longer, climbing higher into the fog. I took 1 step down, then another. The sound changed. The voices stopped. My own heartbeat got louder, echoing like it was inside stone. By the time my boots hit the ground again, the forest looked normal. The fog thinned. I was back in the clearing. The carving on the bottom step had changed. Now it read, "Don't come back." I bolted down the trail. I didn't stop until I saw the ranger gate again. My truck's windshield was covered in dew, except for the words someone had traced in it with a finger. "You went too high." I wiped it away, hands shaking. My phone had no photos of the steps. Just empty frames of fog. I drove home that day and told myself I'd imagined it, but every night since I've dreamed of climbing those stairs again. Only this time, when I reached the top, someone's standing there, waiting, facing away from me, and she's humming. For weeks after that trip, I told myself the dreams were just my brain replaying fear, but the details stayed too exact. The smell of wet stone, the hum under my feet, that same humming voice that always stopped just before I woke. I finally caved and went through my camera SD card on a real monitor. Every photo from that morning was there except one, the set I took of the stairs. In their place was a single image, a blur of gray and green like fog frozen mid-spin. If I zoomed in far enough, I could almost make out shapes in it. Faces, maybe. Dozens, all turned upward. That night, I got a call from an unknown number around 2:17 a.m. I shouldn't have answered, but I did. At first, all I heard was static, then a faint voice, female, soft, half singing, half breathing. You went too high. I hung up, threw the phone across the room. When I picked it up again, the call history showed nothing. No incoming number, no missed call. Just the clock frozen at 2:17. I didn't sleep. By dawn, I'd made a decision I still can't explain. I was going back. The drive was like muscle memory. The road twisted up through fog that felt heavier this time, thicker, almost oily. When I reached the ranger gate, my own boot prints were still in the mud from weeks ago, but another set joined them now, smaller, barefoot, leading up the path and vanishing into the woods. The clearing looked the same at first, quiet, damp, that same impossible stillness. But the stairs were different. Taller now, 30, maybe 40 steps, rising straight into cloud. And at the base, carved into the lowest stone, the warning had changed again. Not yours. I took one photo, just one, then backed away. The air buzzed around the camera like static off a TV screen. When I looked down at the preview, the photo was black. Then the hum started, deep, low, felt it in my ribs before I heard it with my ears. I turned toward the sound. The fog between the trees rippled, and through it I saw movement, people, dozens of them, standing in a ring just beyond the clearing, not walking, not breathing, still, all facing the stairs. Their clothes were old, faded denim, torn coats, some barefoot, skin gray as wet paper. One of them moved. A woman with long hair matted to her shoulders. She stepped forward, hand outstretched, pointing at me. Her mouth opened, but the hum swallowed her voice. Then another step echoed behind me, heavy, on stone. I turned. Someone was climbing the stairs. It was me. Not just someone who looked like me. Same jacket, same pack, same camera swinging at my hip. I froze as the other me reached the halfway point, fog curling around his legs. He didn't look down, didn't hesitate. When he reached the top, the fog above him flared white. For a heartbeat, I saw a doorway, narrow, vertical, made of light. Then both of them were gone. The hum stopped. The clearing went silent again. I ran, didn't look back, didn't take photos. I just ran until the trees broke and I saw my truck. The windshield was fogged again, and this time, the message traced into it wasn't a warning. Who came back? The fingerprint trails were still wet, and when I opened the driver's door, the seat was warm. I didn't tell anyone what happened. Who would believe it? I drove until the mountains disappeared behind me, then kept driving. But it didn't matter. I could feel that place sitting just behind my thoughts, humming like a live wire. For 2 days, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the stairs, and every time there was someone new standing on them, someone I almost recognized. By the third night, my phone started acting up. The GPS arrow wouldn't stay still. It kept flicking north, toward the ridge. The compass app spun like a drain. Then, at 2:17 a.m., the screen lit on its own. A photo I hadn't taken filled the display. Me, asleep in my motel bed. A shadow standing in the doorway behind me. That was enough. I packed up, got in the truck, and drove straight back toward the ridge. It was madness, I know, but some part of me needed to see if it was still there. Needed to prove I hadn't just left myself behind. The ranger gate was open when I arrived. The padlock hung split, metal twisted like something had wrenched it apart. The air smelled different, like rain that hadn't fallen yet. The trail felt shorter this time, every bend familiar, like I'd walked it 100 times before. I reached the clearing just before dawn. The stairs were waiting. They were taller than I remembered, so tall their upper steps vanished into the morning mist. The carvings were gone. The stones looked new, edges sharp and clean, and at the base sat my camera, half buried in moss. It was turned on. Battery full. The lens pointed up the steps. When I lifted it, the viewfinder showed something impossible. The stairs were empty to my eyes, but through the camera I saw a line of people climbing them. Slowly, calmly, silently, each one fading into the fog above. The last in line was me. My heart stopped. The camera slipped from my hands and hit the ground. The instant it did, every tree around the clearing shivered, and the hum returned, deep, resonant, coming from the stones themselves. Then a voice behind me whispered, clear and close, "You were supposed to keep going." I spun around. The woman from before was standing at the tree line, hair dripping as if she'd just stepped out of rain. Her eyes were pale, fog-colored. "You went too high," she said again, her tone almost kind. "But it still let you back. That means it's waiting." "For what?" I managed. She smiled, sad and tired. "For balance." The hum rose to a roar. The ground under my feet trembled. The first step cracked down the middle, glowing faintly from within like molten stone. I ran for the trees, but no matter how far I moved, the clearing stayed around me. The stairs loomed ahead, always just 10 steps away. The forest folded, repeating, bending back on itself like a looped image. Finally, the hum stopped. The world went quiet. The stairs were gone, and standing where they'd been was a single stone, smooth, flat, still warm. Carved into it were the words, "Return same way." I turned and ran until I hit pavement again. I don't remember the drive home. I only remember waking up this morning to sunlight through my blinds. For a moment, I thought it was over. Then I saw what was sitting on my bedside table, a single photograph. It showed the clearing, the stairs, the woman, and me, halfway up, frozen mid-step, one hand reaching into the fog, and at the bottom of the photo, scrawled in handwriting I recognize as my own, "The view was worth it." I work for the County Road Department in eastern Kentucky. Been with them 12 years now. You get used to weird things out here, abandoned mines, unmarked graves, hunters who swear they hear voices in the fog. But the one thing every old-timer tells the new guys is simple. Don't move the cairns. Those little stone piles you see stacked along the switchbacks? Most folks think they're trail markers. But the locals, especially the ones who still live deep in the hollers, say they're graves or anchors or both. They tell stories about miners who messed with them and never made it home. I used to laugh, until last spring. We were clearing a rock slide off County Route 19, halfway up a mountain that doesn't even have a name on the maps. Our crew was just 3 that day, me, Kyle, and our foreman, Denny. Denny was one of those guys who'd drink coffee straight from the pot and cuss the weather like it was personal. He didn't believe in anything he couldn't fix with diesel or duct tape. When we hit the slide, there it was, a perfect cairn sitting right at the edge of the debris. About 3 feet tall, smooth river stones stacked so tight they looked glued. The weird thing was, the rest of the slope was loose shale. No river for miles. Denny spat, squinted, and said, "Some idiot stacked this thing right where it shouldn't be." He kicked the top stone off. I swear the sound it made wasn't rock on rock. It was a crack, deep and sharp, like snapping bone underwater. Kyle and I both froze. Denny laughed, said, "You two look like you saw a ghost." He rolled the rest of it down the hill with the loader, rocks tumbling into the trees below. We finished the job, cleared the road, and called it a day. That night, the weather turned. Sky went green-gray, air thick enough to taste metal. By midnight, thunder was crawling across the hills but never getting closer. My trailer windows rattled with every gust, though there wasn't any wind. Around 2, my phone buzzed. Text from Kyle. "Did you hear it?" Before I could type back, he called. His voice shook so bad I barely recognized it. "There's someone outside," he whispered. "Keep stacking rocks on my porch. Every time I look, there's more." I thought he was drunk. Then I heard it too, through the receiver. A dry clicking sound, stone on stone, slow, deliberate. He said, "It's up to the window now." The line went dead. I didn't sleep after that. Drove to his place first thing in the morning. The porch was covered in stones, hundreds of them, perfectly balanced, all the way to the eaves. Not one had fallen overnight. Kyle's truck was still in the drive, door open, keys in the ignition. No sign of him. I went straight to Denny's house next. His wife answered, eyes red. He hadn't come home either. When I drove back up Route 19 that afternoon, the slide site looked different. The rocks we'd moved were all gone, swept clean. But sitting right in the middle of the road was a new cairn. Taller, tighter, fresh mud between the stones, like it had just been built. A single boot print led up to it. Denny's. And right on top of the stack, balanced perfectly, was his metal name tag, bent clean in half. That's when I heard the first click of stone on stone behind me. Slow, close. I turned. Nothing there. Just the wind, carrying a dry, scraping rhythm from somewhere up the slope. Then a second sound joined it. A whisper, low and steady, like words formed from breath through gravel. Put it back. I backed toward the truck, eyes on the tree line. The sound kept going. Click, click, scrape, like someone stacking stones just out of sight. Every few seconds I caught flashes of movement, pale shapes sliding between the trees, too tall and thin to be deer, too quiet to be men. I told myself it was echo, wind, paranoia, anything but what it sounded like. When I climbed into the cab, I found a handful of gravel sitting neatly on the passenger seat. Fresh dust, damp with mud. I swear it hadn't been there before. Beneath the gravel lay a folded piece of yellow notepad paper. My name was scrawled across it in pencil. I opened it with shaking hands. "You took one," it read. "Now it will take one." The handwriting looked like mine. I threw the rocks out the window, cranked the ignition, and tore down the mountain as fast as those switchbacks would allow. The whole way I kept hearing that dry rhythmic clicking over the roar of the tires, faint but constant, like it had gotten inside the truck. Back in town, I went straight to the sheriff's office, told him everything, Denny, Kyle, the cairn, the rocks on the porch. He gave me that look people reserve for drunks and liars, then promised to send someone up after the storm cleared. That night I tried to sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that road, empty, except for the cairn, and Denny's bent name tag gleaming on top. Around midnight, I woke to a new sound. Not wind, not rain. Stone. Something tapping against the outside wall of the trailer. Slow and deliberate, 3 knocks, a pause, then 2 more. I got up, grabbed my flashlight, and opened the door. Nothing there. Then I looked down. A single perfect stack of 7 stones sat on the welcome mat. The top rock was still wet, like it had just come out of the river. Except there was no river within miles. I went to kick it over, but the moment my boot touched it, the light in my flashlight flickered. The air around me got heavy, like standing inside a storm that hadn't decided to break yet. The stones shifted under my foot. Not falling, but rebalancing, moving on their own until the stack stood taller than before. From somewhere behind me, inside the trailer, something fell. I ran back in. The kitchen window was open, curtain blowing. On the counter sat another small cairn, this one built from chunks of my own gravel driveway. And next to it was a Polaroid. It showed me standing on the mountain road earlier that day, staring at the cairn with my hand out, caught mid-reach. Except I hadn't taken any pictures. I flipped it over. On the back, written in that same uneven pencil, "You shouldn't have come back alone." That's when the phone rang. I almost didn't answer. It was the sheriff. His voice sounded far away, crackling like static. "We found your buddy Kyle," he said. "Least, most of him. You might want to come identify." My throat went dry. "Where?" "Same spot you were working, up by that landslide." I said I'd be there at dawn. He told me to bring Denny's key ring if I still had it. I don't. When I checked the hooks by the door, the ring was gone. replaced by another tiny cairn, 7 stones high, balanced so precisely the top one turned slowly, as if listening. That's when I finally noticed what had changed outside. My truck was covered in them. Hundreds of cairns, all the same height, climbing up the hood and roof, stacked perfectly along the rails and bed, the way snow piles on branches, but heavier, intentional, breathing with the night. As I watched, the nearest one tilted toward me, stone sliding over stone like vertebrae, and that same grinding whisper rose again from the darkness beyond the porch. Put it back. By dawn, I hadn't slept a minute. The cairns on my truck hadn't fallen, not even after the wind kicked up hard enough to rattle the windows. They just stood there, humming faintly, the stones vibrating against each other like teeth grinding in a dream. I waited for the first sliver of daylight, then grabbed my gear and got in the cab. The moment I started the engine, every single cairn collapsed in unison. Not outward, inward, like they were being swallowed. Dust lifted off the hood in one breath and was gone. I drove to the mountain. I don't know what I thought I'd find. Some proof I hadn't lost it, maybe. The air felt colder up there, sharper. When I reached the old slide, the road was clear again. No snow, no debris. But in the middle of the asphalt stood a single new cairn, taller than a man, stacked with impossible precision. The sheriff's cruiser was parked nearby, empty. I honked once. Nothing. Then I saw his hat on the ground beside the cairn, and next to it, something glinted in the frost, his badge bent like Denny's name tag had been. I stepped out, legs shaking. The cairn wasn't still. The topmost rock was turning slowly, almost lazily, grinding across the one beneath it with a low rumble that crawled through my ribs. When I got closer, I realized the stones weren't all stone. Some had texture, edges too soft, curves too human. One, half buried in the stack, had hair frozen into it. I staggered back. My boot hit something hollow. It was Kyle's hard hat, cracked down the center. Inside, written in mud, "Debt paid once, balance remains." I felt movement behind me, the sound of pebbles rolling, hundreds of them, whispering down the slope. From the woods on both sides, new cairns began to rise, stones clicking together like magnets, climbing each other until they stood chest high. And from within those stacks came breath. Dry, rasping, shallow. Like the air moving through a throat that hasn't spoken in years. I turned to run, but the main cairn split down the middle. A long crack opened from top to base, spilling dust and frost. Inside, something shifted. A pale shape pushing outward, too thin to be a man, but wearing the ghost of one's outline. It reached a hand toward me. The fingers weren't stone or flesh. They were both, veins of quartz pulsing faintly under the skin. When it spoke, its voice was the sound of rocks settling after a landslide. "You took one." Its head tilted, and I saw what was lodged in its chest, a river stone with a single drop of blood frozen inside. "Now you'll hold one." Before I could move, the thing pressed that stone into my hand. The cold shot through bone, into the joint of my wrist, spreading like frost under skin. I must have blacked out. When I woke, it was dusk. The cairn was gone. So were the sheriff's car and the road. Just untouched snow and a faint impression of stacked shapes leading into the woods. I drove until I saw houses again, didn't even stop to wash the dirt off. But the stone, it's still here. I can't drop it, can't throw it. Every time I try, it's back in my pocket, warm now, like it's learned my pulse. And this morning, when I went out to start the truck, I saw a small pile of stones on the hood, 7 high, same as before. The top one turned slowly as I stared at it. The whisper came from everywhere at once. "Debt remains." I think I finally understand. Some roads don't need markers to find their way back to you. I used to explore old buildings for fun, back before the world decided to make me pay for it. You know the type. Peeling paint, glass crunching under boots, your flashlight beam cutting through decades of dust. I never thought it was dangerous, until the night the rooms started calling me by name. This was near a dying coal town somewhere in the southern Appalachians. Locals said there was an old company lodge up the ridge, a place where the mining bosses used to drink and sleep off the profits. The road wasn't even marked anymore, just a dirt path swallowed by weeds. I went alone, like an idiot. The lodge looked like every abandoned place, windows gaping, porch sagging, roof folded in like an empty chest. The wood smelled sweet with rot. I parked my truck at the tree line and stepped inside with my camera and recorder. The temperature dropped 5 degrees the moment I crossed the threshold. Inside was wrongly clean. No trash, no graffiti, no animal nests. Just dust so thick it softened every edge. I started down the hallway, doors on each side, all shut. My footsteps echoed like I was walking in a gymnasium instead of a 2-story house. The first door I opened led to a sitting room. Bare except for a single photograph hanging on the wall, a black and white portrait of a group of men in old mining uniforms. No faces visible, all their heads blurred or turned away. Underneath it, faint letters carved into the frame. Guests, 1912. When I looked closer, one of the faces had started to sharpen, not fully, just the outline of a jaw, hairline, maybe a nose. It looked a little like mine. I laughed nervously, blamed pareidolia, and moved on. Second door, a narrow bedroom with an iron bed frame, no mattress, a smell like old pennies clung to the air. My flashlight flickered. When it steadied, there was something new on the wall above the bed, a framed family photo. I froze. It was my family, or close enough to hurt. My father, my mother, me about 6 years old at the edge of the shot. I checked the date stamp in the corner, April 1999. I didn't even own that picture anymore. I backed out fast, heart slamming. Dust plumed behind me, but didn't settle. It hung there, moving in patterns, swirling like breath around unseen shapes. The hallway felt longer now, more doors than before. Every few feet, another appeared, each with a brass plaque. I brushed one with my fingers, H. Marin, my last name. The next door said, Harlan M., my full first and last. The walls seemed to tighten as I walked. The sound of my footsteps came half a second after I took each step, like the building was remembering instead of echoing. I called out, "Hello?" and instantly regretted it. The reply came from every room at once. My own voice, calm, steady. "You shouldn't be here yet." The flashlight died. Darkness swallowed everything except the red blink of my camera. I fumbled for my phone light, and in that brief glow, I saw that every door down the hall was now open, each room flickering with faint lamplight, soft and yellow like someone had just turned it on for me. From deep in the hall, a soft click echoed, the sound of a latch locking. Then another, then another. One by one, the rooms sealed themselves. The only door still open was the one behind me. I turned toward it, ready to bolt, and saw my own reflection standing in that doorway, half-turned, whispering something I couldn't hear over the hum that had started building in the walls. I thought it was my imagination, until it lifted a hand and motioned me inside. That's when I realized the reflection wasn't standing on glass. It was standing in the next room. I should have run. Every instinct screamed, "Get out!" But the air in that hallway had thickened, like syrup, and each step forward felt heavier than the last. My reflection, or whatever it was, waited just beyond the threshold of that open door. The light in there wasn't steady. It pulsed softly, like a heartbeat under glass. "Hello?" I managed, voice cracking. The figure tilted its head, same face, same jacket. But the way it moved, it didn't match me. It was smoother, slower, like someone remembering how to be me. I stepped closer. The air smelled like old cedar and copper, and the hum in the walls deepened into a vibration I could feel in my ribs. "Who are you?" I whispered. It smiled. My smile only wrong, too deliberate, like it had practiced in a mirror for years. Then it spoke, voice soft and flat. "You. Before." Before what? I didn't ask. I couldn't. My tongue felt numb. Then the lights in the hallway flickered again, and suddenly the doors weren't closed anymore. They were wide open, and from each one came a faint noise. People talking, coughing, laughing. Not loud, not distinct, just the sound of rooms being occupied. I turned to look back, but the hall behind me had stretched out longer, lined with more doors than before. I could see movement in some of them, shadows pacing, turning, sitting on unseen beds. I raised my camera and snapped a picture. The flash blinded me for a second. When the white faded, the walls were covered in framed photos, hundreds of them, from floor to ceiling. Each one was a picture of me standing in a different room of the lodge, staring into the camera with an expression I didn't recognize. Every photo had the same caption scratched beneath it. "Checked in." The hum deepened until the floorboards vibrated. I stumbled back, and the reflection moved forward, stepping out into the hall. Up close, I saw that its eyes weren't reflections at all. They were windows, and inside them, I could see more rooms. Beds, walls, shadows moving inside tiny versions of the lodge, like it contained infinite copies of itself. I shouted, "Stop!" and swung the camera at it. The flash went off again. When my vision cleared, the figure was gone, but my camera screen showed it still there, standing inches from me, hand outstretched. I looked down at my hand. The skin along my fingers was blistered, faint outlines of brass letters burned into the palm. H. Marin. The nearest door, the one with that same nameplate, clicked open. Warm light spilled out, golden and soft. I don't know why, but it smelled like my mother's kitchen, like cinnamon and old wood smoke. A voice called from inside. Not mine this time. Hers. "Come on in, Harlan. You're home now." My throat closed. I hadn't heard that voice in 10 years, not since the funeral. I took one step forward, and the hum vanished, replaced by a silence so complete it rang in my ears. The light dimmed. Inside the room, something shifted. Slow, deliberate movement, like someone pushing off a chair. The voice came again, lower this time. "You've already opened the door. You might as well finish what you started." The hallway behind me groaned, boards creaking as the other doors began to swing shut again, one by one, slamming in quick succession, forcing me forward. I crossed the threshold, unable to help myself. The door shut softly behind me, sealing out the last sliver of light. Then the walls whispered, all at once, overlapping voices of every tone and pitch, all using my name. "Welcome back." And the floor beneath me moved. At first, I thought the floor was collapsing. It shuddered beneath my boots, boards flexing like lungs. I stumbled toward the wall, but the wallpaper shifted under my palms. Soft, warm, almost damp. The texture was wrong. It felt like skin trying not to tremble. Then the whispering stopped, and something heavier took its place, a slow, rhythmic sound, like a heartbeat buried in wood. It came from below, steady and calm, as if the whole building had one heart, and I was standing right above it. I turned in circles, flashlight beam trembling over the walls. The room had changed again. It wasn't my mother's kitchen anymore. It was my old bedroom from when I was 10. The same peeling wallpaper, the same twin bed with the dent in the mattress. Even the smell was right. Dust and laundry detergent, and something faintly sweet, like syrup spilled years ago. On the desk sat a framed photo. Me and my parents, smiling at a campsite I barely remembered. But when I looked closer, my eyes in the picture weren't looking at the camera. They were looking past it, straight at me. I dropped the frame. The glass didn't break. It just absorbed the sound. The door behind me clicked once. I tried the handle. Locked. That's when the walls started whispering again, but now it wasn't 100 voices. It was one. Mine. You shouldn't have left me here. I pressed my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The voice was inside. You walked through too many doors, Harlan. The house remembers who it builds for. The air thickened with dust that glittered like ash. It stung my eyes, burned my throat. My flashlight dimmed until the beam was just a weak orange glow. Something moved at the edge of the room. The bed frame creaked, slow and deliberate. I raised the light and saw myself sitting on the mattress. Same clothes, same face. But his eyes were wrong. Gray, blank, reflecting the weak light like wet concrete. He smiled. "Don't worry," he said. "You'll sleep soon. Everyone does." I backed away until my shoulders hit the door. The handle turned on its own, cold against my spine. "I'm not supposed to be here," I said. My voice broke halfway through. He nodded. "That's what they all say." The walls pulsed again, once, twice, and then began to unfold. I don't mean collapse, I mean unfold. Layers of wallpaper peeled back like pages turning, revealing new walls beneath, each with a doorway. Through those doorways I saw other versions of the same room, hundreds of them, stretching away like mirrors facing mirrors. And in every one, another version of me stood, staring back. Some were younger, some older, some twisted, faces warped like melting film. The air vibrated until my teeth hurt. My reflection stood, stepped toward me, and pressed his hand against my chest. His skin was freezing. "Your room's ready," he said. I felt the wall behind me soften, give way. Hands, hundreds of them, reached out from the peeling paper and pulled me backward into the plaster. Cold flooded my lungs. I tried to scream, but the air turned solid in my throat. The last thing I saw was the door swinging open from the inside. My reflection stepped through, carrying my flashlight. The beam swept across the room, caught the nameplate above the frame. H. Marin, checked in. When the light moved on, there was nothing left behind it. They say the old lodge still stands, though it isn't on any map. Locals claim you can hear hammering from inside on quiet nights, like someone's building new walls. I don't explore anymore. But sometimes, when I wake up in strange motels on the road, the wallpaper ripples when I breathe. And in the dark, I swear I hear the walls whisper my name, soft, polite, like a room just waiting to check me back in. This happened to me during the slow burn of a July drought, up on a ridge nobody bothers to name. If you know those fire towers that look like Meccano sets spiked into the spine of West Virginia, I had one of those. End of a logging road that turned to ruts, cabin at the base for supplies and a cot, steel staircase to the box where I spent my nights watching for smoke. It's a lonely job, unless lightning's in the forecast or the county boys are target practicing. That summer, the woods sounded like a dry throat clearing. I won't pretend I was special, seasonal hire. I brought a dog-eared field guide and a hand-crank radio and tried to keep the signal lamp polished, lenses clean, brass contacts bright. Sun went down. The hum came up, the buzzing of a million insects threading the dark together, and I'd sweep the hills with binoculars like I was the second hand on a watch. The first weird thing wasn't visual. It was how quiet the blue hour felt. Usually dusk has layers, cicadas high, tree frogs low, barred owls tuning up like someone bowing the wrong string. That night, all those sounds seemed to take a half step back, like they expected something to speak over them. Even the wind felt cautious, curling and uncurling along the guy wires. At 8:14, I know because I was logging times like a good temp, I saw a smudge moving along the ridgeline west of me. Not smoke. The shape wasn't drifting. It was keeping low, slipping from laurel to laurel. A bear, I told myself. A thin one, shadowy against the last light. But when it broke across a patch of scree, The shape stayed the same. Man tall, shoulders drawn in, edges too clean for fur and too soft for a person. It moved the way heat mirage moves, but in a body. I reached for the radio. Static. I tapped the housing. Nothing but a dry rasp. I wasn't panicking. Radios die, batteries lie. The tower has a big voice of its own, the Aldi's lamp, old-school signal that can talk in light across miles. I propped the shutters, swung the lamp on its gimbal, and thumbed the switch just to be sure the filament took. The bulb flared and settled into a steady white. It painted the inside of the cab in thin milk. On impulse, I tilted it down the steps and out into the brush, just to make sure nobody from the county had snuck up. The beam found nothing. No truck. No boots. I could smell hot dust and the clean metal tang you get right before a storm that won't arrive. When I turned the lamp back toward the ridge, the smudge had closed more distance than made sense. It hadn't crossed the open cuts. I never saw it do that. It just appeared at new cover, closer each time I blinked. I told myself I was tired. I told myself my eyes were double counting. "You won't believe this," I said out loud, like I was rehearsing the report, which is something we do up there, narrating to nobody because the radio doesn't talk back half the time. I flashed 3 longs, 3 shorts, 3 longs, muscle memory from scout days, a silly SOS toward empty hills. It was more for me than any ranger on a distant peak. The shape stopped. I didn't see it stop. I felt it. Like the air stopped moving around it and the insects took another step back. Then, very slowly, a pale glow lifted inside the trees near it. The glow didn't spill like my lamp. It gathered, low and mean, the way a coal will hold on to heat long after the flame. It brightened, dimmed, brightened, dimmed. 3 longs, 3 shorts, 3 longs. I killed my switch. The darkness jumped back in, loud as bats. My heartbeat felt like a boot on each rung of the stairs. The tower creaked, normal settling, but the creak landed in me wrong, like the metal didn't want to take my weight if I decided to move. I have explained this 100 ways since. Marsh gas, kids with a drone, reflection, but reflections don't climb. And that's what the glow did next. It rose, step by step, up the invisible slope, as if there were stairs cut there in the shadow, the light keeping time with my breath. By the time it reached level with the cabin, I wasn't holding the binoculars anymore. My hands had decided all on their own to grip the lamp's housing like a steering wheel. The glow blinked once, deliberate as a wink across a bar. I blinked back. Then, from the trees, something shaped like my lamp's beam swept across my windows from the outside. I don't remember hitting the floor, but that's where I was when the light passed. My ears popped, like the air pressure had dipped, and for a few seconds, everything buzzed, radio static, insects, the hollow of my own chest. Then the buzzing drained away, and the tower was quiet again. I waited. Nothing moved outside. The glow was gone. When I finally stood, my flashlight beam jittered all over the place. I was shaking so badly it looked like the walls were breathing, but they weren't, just heat haze from the metal roof. I forced myself to log the event. 2103. Possible reflection? Then I laughed at the question mark. I wrote human-like movement along West Ridge and signed my name like it meant anything. Sleep? No chance. I dozed upright in the chair, every little ping from the frame making me jump. Around 2 a.m., I swore I heard footsteps on the catwalk outside. Light, even steps like someone careful not to be heard but sure of where each board lay. When I aimed the flashlight out the side window, all I saw was a wet handprint on the glass, not water, not exactly. The smear steamed, then vanished. At dawn, I climbed down to ground level, the ladder cold under my palms. Everything smelled baked and still. I walked out toward the ridge, hoping daylight would turn last night into a trick of the eyes. My prints were all over the base of the tower, but another set, deeper and wider, circled it in uneven loops, like whoever made them kept changing direction. Barefoot impressions in hard soil. The toes pointed both toward and away from the tower. I followed them to where they stopped, halfway between the pines and the shale slope. Just ended. No return path, no drag, no scuff. The trail camera the rangers had left down the line was smashed open, card missing. By lunch, I had convinced myself to stay. That's the thing about isolation. Logic becomes a kind of prayer. I told myself it was a trespasser who wanted to scare me off, someone local, maybe testing a story. I went about chores like a good watchman, checked the radio tower battery, refilled the generator, marked wind direction. I didn't look west. Night 2 came in pink and slow. The insects were back, but their rhythm was off. They paused together, resumed together, paused again, as if the forest were holding its breath in unison. Around 9 p.m., the smell started. Wood smoke, faint and sharp, riding a wind that came from the direction of the old fire scar. I scanned with the binoculars. Nothing. The smell got stronger. I called base again. Static. I swung the lamp west. The first pulse barely cleared the trees before something answered, this time not from a single glow, but dozens of dim lights scattered along the slope, blinking in rough unison. It looked like eyes catching reflection, but too many, too even. They blinked back my sequence. 3 longs, 3 shorts, 3 longs. I should have cut the light. Instead, I whispered into the radio mic like a fool. Identify yourself. You're in restricted range. Static, then my own voice, delayed and warped. Identify yourself. You're in restricted range. I dropped the mic. The lights began to move uphill. Not in a line, but a spiral, circling each other, climbing higher until the topmost glow hung directly across from my cabin window. The air inside the tower dimmed like something was drinking the electricity through the glass. The bulb flickered twice and steadied, but its reflection in the window wasn't steady at all. It pulsed faster than the filament, brighter every time my real lamp dimmed. That's when I noticed the reflection had depth. It wasn't bouncing off glass. It was behind it. Something was standing on the outside catwalk, holding a lamp that looked exactly like mine, down to the chipped enamel and frayed cord. I could see the curve of a shoulder, an outline darker than night. My lamp's glow touched it, but the light bent around it like it refused to land. It raised its lamp and matched my every movement a half-second late. I turned mine off. Its light stayed on. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw a face in that window, pale as ash, eyes like the cold part of a flame. Then it tilted its lamp toward the forest, and every light on the ridge blinked out at once, leaving me alone with the hiss of cooling metal and the faint smell of something burned but not gone. And from the catwalk came 3 slow knocks on the door. I didn't answer the door. If you've ever been that scared, you know there's a special kind of silence that feels pressured, like sound is being vacuumed out of the air. That's what I was in. 3 knocks, then nothing, and every instinct screaming at me to breathe quieter. I gripped the flashlight tight enough that my hand cramped. I told myself I'd imagined the sound, but I could still see dust motes drifting from where the doorframe had shuddered. When I finally moved, it wasn't courage. It was the cold. The tower's temperature dropped fast, as if someone had opened every window at once. My breath fogged. I stepped to the hatch at the floor, just enough to glance through the grate to the stairs spiraling below. The steps were dark, no glow, no reflection, but halfway down, one railing bolt was still vibrating. Something had brushed past it seconds ago. I pulled the hatch shut, locked it, and backed away. Then came the voice. Low, flat. A man's, maybe mine if I'd been buried alive for a few years. Turn it on, it said. Not loud, not angry, just certain. It came from right below the floor. I didn't reply. The voice said it again, closer this time. Turn it on, the light. My hand hovered over the switch, that ridiculous brass lever I'd trusted to call for help. The radio was dead, the world was too far away, and part of me thought maybe if I obeyed, it would stop. I flipped the lamp back on. Instant warmth flooded the cabin. Not comforting warmth, but chemical, like the heat from a flare. The bulb glared white, then gold, then red. The tower groaned underfoot. Outside, the forest answered with tiny points of fire flickering into life among the trees, hundreds of them, pulsing to match my lamp's rhythm. I realized then that whatever was down there wasn't watching my light. It was feeding on it. The hatch bolts rattled. One popped loose and rolled toward my boot. I dropped to my knees and tried to twist it back in, but the metal was so hot it burned my fingers. The light outside brightened again, waves of it, like breath against glass. Then I saw something rise from the trees, not a shape but a distortion, heat shimmer thick enough to warp the air. It climbed impossibly fast and hit the tower in a shock that made every joint scream. The lamp burst, just exploded. Glass rained over me, and the darkness that replaced it wasn't normal dark. It was crowded, like there was still movement inside it. I smelled ozone, wet soil, and something like burned hair. The air pulsed. For a heartbeat, I could see everything at once, the catwalk, the forest, and myself, except my shadow on the far wall didn't match. It stood a second longer, then turned and walked away before I could even move. I think I fainted. I must have. Because when I woke, it was morning, sun burning clean through the window, the lamp still ruined at my feet. The hatch was locked again, all bolts in place. I don't remember doing that. My report sheet was gone, pages torn neatly from the clipboard. Only a single line remained on the backing board, written in my own handwriting. Keep the light off after dark. I hiked out that afternoon, didn't even radio in. I left the tower open, door swinging in the wind. 2 weeks later, the station chief called. Said the replacement watcher had quit after one night. Claimed someone was signaling him from the ridge. 3 longs, 3 shorts, 3 longs, and when he tried to flash back, the response came from directly beneath his tower. I told him to let it burn next time, and when I drive past that ridge now, I swear I still see a faint glow up there after dusk. Steady, waiting, like someone who's learned patience. I don't climb towers anymore, and I never, ever answer the light. You won't believe this, but I still check trailheads for her name. I hike a lot now, mostly alone, but every time I sign a logbook, I look for Cara L written in that tall, even print. The first time I saw it was 3 summers ago, at a campground outside a little town in southern Ohio, where the Appalachian Trail snakes close enough to feel like a rumor. We were a group of 6 back then, weekenders pretending to be thru-hikers. I was the only one with a compass, and even that was clipped to my pack like jewelry. We weren't deep wilderness types. We were teachers, bartenders, a nurse, people who thought the woods were a weekend detox. The second evening, right before dusk, she walked out of the tree line. No noise, just there, thin, pale, hair in a single braid down her back, wearing a yellow rain shell even though the day had been bone dry. She smiled like we'd been expecting her. "You guys heading north?" she asked. We were. I said so, and she nodded once as if confirming something private. She had a trail badge clipped to her pack strap, laminated and scuffed. Search and Rescue, Summer 2021. That should have been weird, right? It was 2023, but I just thought, leftover gear. Happens all the time. She set her pack down near the fire and sat without asking. Nobody minded. Something about her felt normal, like an old friend tagging along after years apart. She said her name was Cara. She didn't say much else. That night, as we ate freeze-dried chili and listened to coyotes, I noticed she hadn't opened her food pouch. When I offered mine, she shook her head. Already ate on the ridge, but her pack was still zipped. No stove, no utensils, nothing to suggest she'd cooked anything at all. Later, around midnight, I woke to the sound of someone walking around the tents, slow, deliberate, circling. The others were asleep. I unzipped my fly just enough to look out. Kara was standing by the fire pit, hands hanging at her sides. Her face caught the moonlight wrong. I couldn't see her eyes, just the gleam of teeth as she whispered something I couldn't make out. Then she stepped into the tree line. Not away from camp, just into it, like a person walking through smoke instead of branches. The forest closed behind her, not even a rustle. I told myself she was just stretching, or maybe sleepwalking, but when dawn came, her pack was still by the fire. Unzipped now. Inside, a faded trail permit with a photo of her that looked almost right, except her eyes were open too wide. And the issue date? 2 years earlier. The expiration date matched the day she'd joined us. She came back that morning from the opposite direction of where she'd left, still smiling, same yellow shell. "Morning," she said, like nothing happened. Nobody asked her about the pack, not one of us. When we packed up to leave, I noticed her shadow didn't quite line up with the rest of ours. It tilted slightly uphill, like the light hit her from a different sun. We hiked all day, her footsteps always a half beat behind. She never asked for breaks, never drank water. And when I checked the logbook at our next campsite that evening, her name was already written there, ink dry, dated yesterday. That was when I finally asked, "Did you hike ahead and come back or something?" Kara looked at me like I'd just said something dangerous. Then she smiled wider, and for the first time I noticed there was dirt under her nails. Dark, damp dirt, like from deep soil. She said, "Sometimes the trail doesn't move forward the same for everyone." And then she asked, perfectly calm, "Do you remember how many of us started this trip?" I laughed when she asked that. It came out too loud, brittle in the quiet. 6, I said automatically. "There's 6 of us." She smiled again, polite but a little too knowing. "Are you sure?" That night, the woods felt wrongly close. The air was still, no wind, no bug drone, not even the flap of nylon tents. You don't notice silence until it feels like something's listening to itself. I lay awake staring at the top of my tent, waiting for the forest to remember how to breathe. At some point, I heard her voice again. Not far, just outside the ring of our campfire glow. She was whispering. I couldn't make out the words, but the rhythm sounded like counting. When I peeked out, I saw her kneeling beside someone's tent, just kneeling there, head bowed, hair falling forward. The firelight hit her rain shell and rolled off like oil. It didn't reflect. It absorbed. That detail sticks with me. By morning, Brian, the quiet guy who'd been tailing the group, was gone. His gear, his tent, everything still there. But him? Nothing. We thought he'd gone to find a water source, so we waited. After 2 hours, Kara said, "He's off trail now." "How do you know?" I asked. She pointed downslope, toward where the fog was thickest. "Because the trail stopped letting him through." Nobody laughed this time. We packed up fast, trying not to talk. I felt that same sick feeling you get when you lose the path for real. The sense that the map's a lie and the trees have swapped places while you blinked. Every step felt unfamiliar, even though the blazes were still there, bright white against bark. Around noon, we came to a split that wasn't on the map. One trail led uphill, clean and dry. The other dipped into a narrow hollow full of fern and mist. Kara didn't hesitate. She went down. "Shortcut," she said. "Doesn't show one here," I told her. She didn't even turn around. That's because it wasn't there before. The rest of us exchanged looks, but we followed. Nobody wanted to be the one to stay behind. The air down there smelled cold, metallic, almost sweet like sap mixed with blood. The deeper we went, the quieter it got. Our footfalls sounded thick, muffled by the fog. Then we found the markers. Not paint, stones. Small stacks of rock lining the sides of the trail, each topped with a scrap of cloth. Some were rotted, others fresh enough that the fibers still clung to color, red, blue, yellow. the kind of tags rescue teams leave when searching for missing hikers. My stomach dropped. "Kara," I said, "what is this?" She was a few steps ahead, staring at one of the piles. "You're standing in the old section," she murmured. "They closed it after the accident." "What accident?" But she didn't answer. She crouched and touched one of the cairns. The moment her fingers brushed the top stone, every sound died again. Even our breathing seemed to pause in our throats. Then, just as suddenly, the fog rippled like wind moving through water, and she straightened up, smiling that same empty smile. "See? He's fine now." She pointed down the trail. Brian was there. At least he looked like Brian. Same clothes, same pack, even the same sunburn across his nose. But his face was gray, and his eyes, they weren't focusing. They were locked on Kara, following her like a dog waiting for a command. He didn't say a word. We were too scared to ask questions. We just climbed, fast as we could, until the light started to change. Sunset again, orange bleeding into blue. When we reached the next clearing, Kara was suddenly gone. No footsteps, no sound. Just gone. Brian sat down hard on a rock, rubbing his temples. "Did we go the wrong way?" he asked. I looked back. The fog was gone. So were the stone piles. When I opened my trail log that night, the last entry wasn't mine. Same pen, same ink, just one line written neatly in tall, even print. 7 hikers, northbound. But there were only 5 of us left. We didn't talk about it that night. No one mentioned the number. We sat around a weak fire, listening to it pop like bone joints, pretending we couldn't feel the space Brian had left when he wandered off to get air. None of us followed him. None of us wanted to. I tried to joke, said something like, maybe he found cell signal. Nobody laughed. After an hour, I realized I couldn't even picture his voice anymore. His laugh, his face, they were softening in my head, like an old dream already slipping away. Sometime after midnight, the temperature dropped fast. I woke to find frost blooming on my tent's seams, the nylon stiff and glittering. It was midsummer. My breath fogged. I heard voices outside, soft, muttering, all saying the same thing on loop. I pressed my ear to the tent wall. 7 hikers northbound, 7 hikers northbound. The voices were wrong, like too many people whispering at once through a hollow tube. I unzipped my tent. The fire had died to coals. Around it stood 5 shapes. My friends, all of them. But their heads were tilted back at identical angles, mouths open, exhaling mist into the air. And behind them stood her. Kara. Only her braid was gone, hair loose and black in the moonlight. Her eyes were blank, her rain shell stained darker down the sleeves. When she turned toward me, her lips didn't move, but her voice was in my head, whispering like cold water over stones. "You shouldn't have come this far north." I wanted to shout, but my body felt slow. Dream heavy. The others began stepping backward in unison toward the trees. Every crunch of their boots sounded just a little off-tempo, like I was hearing the echo before the step. Kara held out her hand. Her fingers were gray, soil packed beneath the nails. I stumbled backward into my tent, zipped it closed like that could help. I heard her say, "He'll stay for the count." And then, nothing. Just wind. When dawn came, the forest was empty. Tents collapsed, food half-cooked, footprints vanishing into the leaf mold. I yelled for them until my throat burned. No answer. Just the snap of branches shifting somewhere deep in the fog. I ran south. Didn't stop for hours. When I hit the ranger outpost, I must have looked wild. I told them everything. About Kara, about the fog, about Brian, about the trail that shouldn't exist. The ranger listened, then pulled out a laminated notice from the corkboard. Missing hiker, Kara Lester, 27. Last seen June 2021. Search discontinued due to hazardous terrain. Her photo was the same face I'd seen by our fire, same rain shell, same braid. I tried to explain the logbook entries, the extra names, but the ranger said there wasn't a logbook at that campground anymore. It had been pulled after the disappearances. That was 3 years ago. I don't go near that stretch of trail now, but sometimes, when I'm scanning trail forums, I'll see a post from someone new, someone talking about a quiet woman in a yellow rain jacket who joins groups just before sunset. She helps them find water, they say. She never eats, never sleeps, and when they check the trail register the next morning, her name is already written there. Always in the same careful handwriting, always signed with the same note beneath. 7 hikers, northbound. I used to think churches were the quietest places in the world. I was wrong. They're only quiet when they're empty. And I mean truly empty, not the kind of empty that still remembers people. This happened to me 2 winters ago, when I was working as a janitor for a Baptist church in a little mountain town, somewhere near the Tennessee border. I took the job because it paid cash, and the work was simple. Sweep, polish, lock up after evening choir. The old pastor liked to remind me that the Lord was listening. I used to think that was metaphorical. The choir held a heritage revival that month. Old hymns, shape note singing, stuff from before any of us were born. The kind of music that sounds like it should echo across a hollow at midnight. My job was to clean up after, which meant hauling folding chairs, emptying coffee urns, and collecting hymnals the singers left behind. That's how I found it. A battered, hand-stitched book sitting on the altar rail. It wasn't like the others. The cover was leather, but soft, worn thin. No publisher mark, no date. Inside, the notes were written by hand, the ink browned with age. Someone had scratched a name across the inside cover in fountain pen. For the ones who still listen. I almost laughed. It felt like something from a ghost story. I tucked it under my arm and brought it to the back office to ask the pastor about it. But he was gone already. Lights off, doors locked. I left it on the desk and finished mopping. When I came back, the book was on the piano bench. I figured I'd just forgotten where I'd left it. I took it home, planning to drop it off in the morning. My apartment was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your ears. I flipped open the book. No lyrics, just musical notation, strange time signatures, 5/8, 7/11, and a melody that looked like it was winding back on itself. I don't play, but I hummed the first few bars to see how it might sound. It was low, uneven, but weirdly catchy. That's when I felt something move behind my eyes, not pain, just a flutter, like a muscle twitching inside my skull. My jaw tingled. My tongue did too, as if a note were sitting there waiting to come out. I shut the book fast. But as I went to bed, I could still hear it, not through my ears, in my mouth. Like the melody had taken up residence somewhere between my teeth and my breath. At first, I thought I was just overtired. I tried brushing my teeth, gargling, even humming something else to shake it loose. Every time I stopped, the same tune picked up again, muffled, internal, too close to be real sound. The next morning, I brought the hymnal back to the church. The pastor wasn't in, only Mrs. Clark, the choir director. I told her I'd found it after the revival. When she saw it, her face drained. "Where did you say you found that?" she asked. "By the altar," I said. She made the sign of the cross, not something Baptists usually do. That book was supposed to stay sealed. Reverend kept it from the old revival site on the hill. They said the song inside doesn't stop when you do. I half smiled, waiting for the punchline. She didn't give one. That night, cleaning again, I swore I heard someone humming in the empty pews. The same tune, slow and thick, like it was being played through water. I turned off the vacuum and listened. The sound stopped instantly. But when I opened my mouth to call out, the hum came from me. The same notes, perfect pitch, all by themselves. I clamped my mouth shut, and the melody kept going, soft, muffled, still coming from somewhere behind my teeth. You ever drive long enough that the world starts looping? The same gas stations, the same dead deer, the same mile marker that feels like it's following you instead of the other way around? I used to think that was highway hypnosis, just fatigue. But what happened to me last winter on I-75 through the Tennessee mountains wasn't any trick of the eyes. It was about 3 a.m, icy fog rolling low and heavy. I was hauling a flatbed of timber down from a mill near Jellicoe, trying to make Knoxville by dawn. Been driving rigs for 16 years. I know when I'm tired, I know when I'm drifting, and I know what I saw. My GPS froze about an hour before it happened. The map just hung there, blue dot blinking in place, like it was refusing to admit I'd gone anywhere. I figured I'd lost signal. Happens. Then the signs started repeating. Exit 0, Harrison Hollow 1 mile. First time I didn't think about it. Second time I frowned. Third time I slowed down, checked the odometer, looked at my dash cam, same sign, same bent guardrail just before it, same frost pattern on the shoulder. I pulled over, engine idling, fog curling around the hood like breath. I stepped out to stretch, thinking maybe I'd missed a turn. The woods along the highway were silent, not just quiet, muted like the snow was swallowing sound before it reached me. Then a horn blared behind me. I spun around expecting another truck. Nothing there. My own rig lights were the only glow on the road, stretching in both directions forever. I climbed back in and turned on the radio. Every station was static except one, a talk channel that shouldn't have been local. A calm voice, female, saying, "Exit 0. Keep right for the return route. Do not stop on the shoulder." I turned it off. 5 minutes later, I passed the same sign again. Exit 0, Harrison Hollow, 1 mile. That's when I noticed my passenger mirror. Something sat in it. Not a person, exactly. Just a shape, dark against the dashboard reflection. It was hunched, like someone asleep in the seat beside me. But I was alone. I reached over, touched the seatbelt latch. Cold, empty. The shape didn't move, just stayed there, head tilted slightly toward me. The air in the cab changed. Warmer, like someone had just breathed out next to my ear. I looked back at the road, knuckles white on the wheel, and whispered to myself, "Just keep driving." The exit ramp finally appeared, flashing yellow lights, a small gas station with a flickering open sign. Relief hit me so hard I laughed. I pulled in, parked under the awning. The moment I stopped, the shape in the mirror shifted, slowly turning its head toward the window. Before I could react, someone knocked on my door. 3 slow taps. A man stood there, face half in shadow, wearing an old highway worker's jacket with reflective strips that didn't catch the light. "You missed it again," he said. I cracked the window. "Missed what?" "The turnoff. You keep passing it, every time." I stared at him. "You saw me?" He nodded. His teeth looked gray in the fog. "You'll see it again soon. Just don't let it get too far ahead." Then he stepped back into the mist and vanished. Not walked, vanished, like the fog closed over him and decided to keep him. I sat there until the gas pump lights started flickering. The road beyond the lot was empty. I checked my clock, 3:04 a.m. Then I looked again. Still 3:04 a.m. I thought maybe the display was stuck until the second hand started ticking backward, and then the radio clicked on by itself. Same calm voice whispering this time. "Exit 0, loop confirmed, 1 occupant pending." The mirror fogged over beside me, and the words appeared, written backward from inside the glass. "Keep driving. He's not out yet." I don't remember deciding to obey. The engine just roared to life, and I was back on the road before the rational part of my brain could argue. Every instinct said run, and that's exactly what I did, though I couldn't tell you what from. Fog swallowed the world in both directions. My high beams hit a wall of white so dense it looked solid. The CB was dead, phone dead, GPS still blinking that stupid frozen dot. Only the hum of tires on asphalt kept me sane, until the voice came back. Same calm woman, same perfect diction. This time through the cab speakers even though the radio was off. Continue en route, maintain speed, do not exit. My hands clenched tighter on the wheel. Who the hell is this? I shouted. You have driven this segment 8 times. Correction, 9. No, I just left the station. Fuel reserves recalibrated, loop integrity holding. The fuel gauge did look wrong. Full, somehow. I hadn't pumped a drop. My stomach turned cold. I checked the odometer. It hadn't moved either. Still, 327, 941.6. I forced myself to slow down, pulled onto the shoulder, opened the door. The air outside was syrupy with fog. When I looked back, the tail lights didn't fade. They just stopped, like the darkness ate them whole. And then, from that same black throat of mist, headlights appeared. 2 bright eyes, low and steady, approaching fast. I climbed back in, but before I could throw it into gear, another rig blew past me. Same make, same company decal, same trailer number. I stared, mouth dry. That was my truck. I hit the accelerator, merging back onto the highway. The duplicate ahead of me looked perfect, right down to the little crack in the rear light cover I'd been meaning to fix for months. Maintain formation, the voice said, soft in my ear. He needs time to finish his route. Who's he? I demanded. No response. Fog thinned for a second, and I saw a green overhead sign ahead. Exit 0, Harrison Hollow, 1 mile. Again. I checked the clock, 3:04 a.m., ticking backward now so fast the hands blurred. I honked, flashed my lights, trying to get the other truck's attention. It didn't react, but in my side mirror, I saw movement. A man, maybe the same road worker, running along the shoulder, face gray, waving both arms. His mouth was open, shouting words I couldn't hear. I rolled down the window just enough to catch one phrase. He's not you yet. Then the road curved and he vanished behind the fog wall. The other truck slowed near the exit. I followed. The signs, the gas station, the flickering open light, all identical. But something was off. The windows were black, not dark, painted. Shapes moved behind them, silhouettes pacing too fast to be human. The other rig turned down the ramp and disappeared. I stayed put at the top, engine idling, heart banging. The radio hissed again. 1 occupant transferred. Confirm continuation? I shouted. No, I'm done. I'm leaving this road. Denied. The dash lights flickered. The steering wheel jerked hard right, dragging me onto the ramp like a magnet had locked onto the tires. The fog opened ahead of me like curtains parting for a stage. At the bottom of the ramp, the gas station sat exactly where it had been before. Except this time, the open sign glowed blood red, and the man in the reflective jacket stood under it, waving me forward. You're almost there, he called. I rolled the window down a crack. Where is this? What is this? He smiled, and I saw that half his face wasn't flesh. It was headlight glass, cracked and glowing from within. It's where you finally pull off. He pointed behind me. In the mirror, my truck, the other one, was rolling up slow, driver visible through the windshield. Same hat, same jacket, same face. Mine. He smiled once, lifted a hand, and I heard my own voice whisper from the passenger seat. One of us has to stop driving. I floored it. Tires screamed, the trailer fishtailed, and the reflection, my reflection, kept pace perfectly behind me, headlights burning too bright. The man at the gas station didn't move as I passed him. He just lifted a hand, and the fog folded shut like curtains closing on a show I was never meant to see. The road straightened again. Same cracked guardrail, same frost on the shoulder, same sign. Exit 0, Harrison Hollow, 1 mile. I started laughing, sharp and high, the kind of laugh that comes when panic has nowhere left to go. I was trapped inside a loop of asphalt and silence. My other self was still behind me, his rig's engine growling in sync with mine. Every time I slowed, he did. Every time I swerved, he mirrored it. The mirrors showed him closer than he should have been, the distance shrinking each time the clock rewound. The hands spun backward again, 3:03, 3:02, 3:01, then froze at 3:00 a.m. The voice returned, calm, clinical. Synchronization complete. Route closure authorized. My dashboard lights flickered. The cab filled with warmth, sweet, exhaust-thick warmth that smelled like burning rubber and static electricity. The radio turned itself on and broadcast the sound of my own breath. For a second, I thought the speakers were echoing me. Then I realized it wasn't echo. It was ahead of me, a half-second early, like the truck behind was anticipating everything I was about to do. I screamed, slammed the brakes. My truck skidded sideways across the center line. The other rig stopped inches from my bumper. The headlights died. I climbed out, boots crunching on frost. The fog glowed faintly from nowhere. My duplicate stepped out of the other cab. Same height, same jacket, even the same burn scar on my wrist. Except his eyes were hollow, two perfect tunnels of black. He walked toward me, unhurried. Each step he took made the air hum, a deep vibration that rattled my chest cavity. "What do you want?" I yelled. He tilted his head, smiled. "You missed your exit." Then he reached out, and the world tore sideways. The road, the trees, the night itself, everything peeled away like film melting off a reel. For a second, I saw dozens of me, trucks lined one after another, all turning the same wheel in perfect time. The highway wasn't a line anymore. It was a circle, looping through fog and light, every copy of me staring forward, eyes wide and unblinking. I don't remember getting back in the cab. I just know the seat felt colder, the steering wheel smoother. My hands didn't quite line up with where I thought they should be. When I looked in the side mirror, the reflection blinked a half-second late. The CB hissed. "Route transfer successful. Welcome, new occupant." And then static. I drove until the sun came up. At least, I think it was sun. Pale light through fog. Nothing beyond a few hundred feet. My GPS started working again, but the screen didn't show I-75 anymore. Just a single gray line labeled Return Route. I finally saw another sign a few miles later. Not green this time. White, cracked, almost glowing. Exit 0. Harrison Hollow, 1 mile. The needle on my fuel gauge hasn't moved since. The clock still says 3:00 a.m. Sometimes, if I glance in the mirror quick enough, I see headlights following, too close, perfectly in sync, and every so often, a voice over the CB whispers, "Maintain speed, do not stop, loop integrity holding." I don't know which of us she's talking to anymore, but I keep driving, because I'm starting to think I'm the other one now. That's all for this episode, but the nightmares don't end here. Subscribe for daily horror stories, leave a like if you want more, and let me know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.